Welcome to Hispanic Speak Out TV. I am Maribeth Gonzalez, a family law attorney here in Central Florida, and your host for this evening. And today we have a very special guest. We have with us Orlando Police Department Chief Mina. Welcome, Chief Mina.
Good evening.
So, can you tell our guests why you're running for sheriff and why they should vote for you?
All right, so I have been a resident of Orange County for 28 years. I care deeply about the safety of this community, and because of my qualifications, I feel a deep responsibility to do this. This is the community that I have chosen to raise my family in, and I want to keep it safe, and I know I can keep it safe. You know, like you said, I've been the chief of the Orlando Police Department for 27 years. It's the largest municipal police department in Central Florida. It's the fourth largest municipal police department in the state of Florida. I command 1,000 personnel. I'm in charge of a $146 million budget. I have widespread community support, and I've reduced crime and connected with our community in that way.
Besides being in law enforcement and being a law enforcement organization, there's other factors that go into when running a department so huge as the Orange County Sheriff's Office. Do you believe you're the best candidate for this position?
You know, I think you and all the voters in Orange County will have to look at all the candidates, and you'll have to say what separates one candidate from the next. And I think when you see the experience level that I have, specifically in police executive leadership experience, there's a huge separation. I've testified before Congress before. I've spoken at the White House. Most recently, I was called up to Tallahassee to give Governor Scott recommendations from law enforcement on the new school safety bill. Many of those recommendations were implemented in that new bill. So I, by far, among all the other candidates, have the most experience and really have a better connection with this community. This is the community in Orlando, in Orange County, that I have served for 27 years. I've been here this entire time, and I have relationships throughout all of Central Florida that I think will help me be a better sheriff than the other candidates.
And how did the poll strategy affect you directly and indirectly?
You know, it affected me deeply. You know, it affected me as a father. You know, my sons could have been there. Their friends could have been there. You know, as part of this community, it affected me as well. You know, this was really an attack on our community, and instead of responding with hatred, this community responded with love, kindness, and compassion. And as far as being, you know, chief law enforcement executive in the city of Orlando, you know, I saw a need for better equipment for our officers, and because of the Pulse tragedy, I ensured that all of our officers now have additional body armor and Kevlar helmets, so that we are better prepared if, God forbid, that would ever happen again.
And with regards to the body cameras, how many officers carry body cameras?
So right now, as of this day, all of our first responders carry body-worn cameras, and that's almost about 450. So all the officers that you see out there in uniform, in marked patrol cars, have the body-worn camera. You know, we're a big fan of the body-worn cameras. You know, I think there's this misconception that police officers don't want to have body-worn cameras, but in fact they do, because they want to tell their side of the story as well. And I think it holds citizens accountable, and it holds our officers accountable, and I'm glad that we have them.
Thank you. So let's talk a little bit about gun violence, because it's made an impression on our community lately, and some specific tragic events has been the murder of Lieutenant Deborah Clayton, the Parkland mass shooting, the murder of 2 police officers in Kissimmee, the murder of 2 deputies in Gilchrist County, and the shooting of officer in Valencia, and the loss of 4 children, which this just happened recently, about 2 weeks ago. Can you tell the public a little bit about your stance about gun control, and what is your position on that issue?
Well, whatever we have been doing is not working. So I believe in universal background checks. I believe that if you're on the no-fly list, you shouldn't be able to purchase a weapon. I'm glad the county just changed the laws for purchases outside of gun shows. When you go to buy a firearm, there should be a complete background check, and that's why I'm for universal background checks. But more importantly, we need to figure out a way to keep guns out of the hands of our mentally ill. Because if you look at a number of those cases that you talked about, there is a mental illness component. And I'm glad that the state of Florida and the governor passed the law so that if a family member, if law enforcement thinks that that person should not be able to purchase a gun or have a gun in their possession, they can get an injunction, and it'll be up to a judge after hearing to decide whether or not that person can possess that firearm.
Okay. And with regards to the immigration issue, because it's a huge topic on all our news station and affects our community here in Central Florida, being that we're so diverse, some people might be scared to call law enforcement because of their immigration status. What would you say to our viewers?
Well, I would say that I have a perspective on immigration, and my father immigrated here from the Middle East, and I've heard stories about him being kicked out of his own home in Palestine by Israeli soldiers, so I have that experience to draw upon. And I think the good thing for the residents in Orange County is that this is an extremely inclusive community, and we have welcomed people of all national origins, no matter where they come from, with open arms. And I think Orlando and Orange County has a history of doing that. So, I've met with many groups regarding this administration's stance on immigration, and what I tell them is this: the Orlando Police Department, the Orange County Sheriff's Office, we have great bias-free and fair, impartial policies in place, and we don't stop detaining or talk to anyone based upon their national origin or immigration status. So I think that we're doing a good job here in Central Florida. I think the rest of the country needs to follow our lead.
And has there been issues where that has been the case? And if there has, how has the Orlando Police Department handled it?
We have not had any specific cases where Homeland Security or ICE has called upon us to participate in any type of raid or operation. So we've never done that. I've been at the Orlando Police Department for 27 years. We have never done that. We don't plan on doing that. That's really not the function of local law enforcement. So I think the residents can rest easy in that respect.
Okay. And can we talk a little bit about community policing and any initiatives that you are looking forward to continuing or putting in place?
Yeah, and so that's a big part of my campaign. In the past 4.5 years as chief of the Orlando Police Department, I have made it a priority to engage with our community, because many of the residents, and especially our youth that we deal with, especially in some of our more challenging areas challenged by crime, there's a lack of trust sometimes between especially our youth and law enforcement. So we have done so much community engagement with our youth, and we have a number of mentoring programs. We do midnight basketball, we do coffee with a cop, we have barbecues in our neighborhoods, just to show the residents and especially our youth that we're human too. And especially in some of those areas, it's important for our youth to see law enforcement in a non-enforcement type situation. So many times when law enforcement shows up to a neighborhood, it's because something bad happened. Someone was shot, someone was killed, someone's going to jail, someone's getting a ticket. We want the residents and people to see us in a different light and interacting in a social way with our youth and our residents and our business owners. So all those programs that we have in the city of Orlando, I want to bring to our entire county. I think it's helped. I think it's helped drive crime down. It's helped drive the number of arrests down. And I think as a community, we're doing better because there's better interaction with our residents and law enforcement.
If we can go back to gun control. You have kids? You have children?
I do have
Okay.
2 boys.
How do you feel about gun control and teachers carrying weapons? How do you feel about that?
Right, so I've come out strong on the record against teachers carrying guns in our schools. My recommendation is to have a school resource officer or deputy in every single school. I think we're lucky here in Orange County and Orlando where we have 2 school resource officers in every high school. We have 1 in every middle school, and now because of the new bill, we'll be required to have 1 in every single elementary school. Right now, both agencies only have about 1 for every 3 or 4 schools, so we need to increase the amount of officers we have in our schools. So, I don't agree with arming our teachers. They have a very challenging job as it is, and they're charged with educating our kids, our students. So they need to focus on that and let law enforcement and security personnel focus on keeping the school safe, and whether that's putting more school resource officers in place or hardening that target and single point access and more video, more security to keep our kids safe, because it's extremely important.
Well, it's sad to hear on the news when you send your kids to school and you think they're coming back home, and some of them don't come back home. And I would imagine law enforcement requires training, hours of shooting, gun range, whatever the requirements are to get trained in that.
Right, and so that's why I'm for our school resource officers or additional law enforcement in schools. I think it's too much of a burden on the taxpayers, on our community, and especially our teachers to, it's one thing to be trained in how to shoot a firearm, but how to de-escalate a situation that does not require the use of deadly force, how to use deadly force in a high stress situation. That takes years of experience and months of training. That's training that our law enforcement officers go through. So I'm not in favor of the Army teachers or any type of Guardian or Sentinel program.
And you stated that you're looking to increase the elementary resource officers. Have there been any incidents with the elementary students?
No. So again, we're lucky here in Orlando and Orange County, and at the Orlando Police Department, we keep statistics on weapons recovered. So we're not recovering weapons from elementary school, and like in high schools, and really in high schools, it's really not as much as some would think. But we need to ensure that all our children are safe. When we send our kids off to school, that should be a place of safety to them, and I think everyone can agree on that. So we just need to ensure that we have the most security we can as possible in our schools.
And what other initiatives are you looking to put in place or excited about or want to share with our public?
Yeah, I'm going to build on a lot of the great work that Sheriff Demings has already done. As you and many of our viewers know, that Sheriff Demings has endorsed me, as well as every single mayor in Orange County. I have the endorsement of the Fraternal Order of Police and many other organizations. And I am going to focus on reducing violent crime. I'm going to focus on school safety. I'm going to focus on community engagement. And I'm also going to focus on doing everything we can to keep our deputies safe, because as you saw with Officer Kevin Valencia, Lieutenant Deborah Clayton, if we can't be safe, we can't keep all of you safe.
Thank you. Thank you for watching and staying tuned with us. Well, thank you. We all wish Chief Mina much success, and thank you for joining us. We will see you next time.
Thank you.
Esto es amor de verdad, nadie lo puede dudar.
Step up to craft beer. Taino Light Lager has a crisp, refreshing Caribbean-style flavor. Boricua Craft Ale, full-bodied flavor for the true beer drinker. Stop drinking beer water. Taino Craft Light Lager and Boricua Strong Craft Ale. Feel the rhythm and come up to craft beer.
On the other hand, we look at the individual rights of the person versus the rights of society. And my personal legal analysis is that the rights being restricted for free speech are not overcome by the harm that was being done to individuals because of this. So I think our Congress did an amazing thing, and to the rest of the world, we stood up and we said, we will not tolerate this, and America stands for freedom.
Thank you. And either Ross or Lisa, can you share with us about the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, also known as TVPA, which is arguably the most important anti-trafficking law ever passed, and why we would want to continue to support it?
I'm going to defer to Lisa on that, but if I can just add something to the question that was asked previously about the free speech issue versus public policy interest in stopping or creating a policy where online companies have some liability or culpability. We make public policy decisions all the time. We balance interests, even in the context of free speech. For instance, you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. You can't, you're not able to have absolute free speech if you incite violence, right? So that we have limitations on free speech all the time. I'm certainly sensitive to that argument, but when you're talking about children and being used in criminal activity, certainly I don't think that the First Amendment should be used as a shield behind which these folks should be protected. Thank you. Go ahead.
And in response to your question about the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, that started in 2000 and has evolved over the last almost 20 years. But essentially it creates our federal laws that protect victims of human trafficking. And it started out by first criminalizing human trafficking. It started out by creating that initial federal law that said this is a crime and it needs to be prosecuted. And then that also included that victims could receive restitution from their traffickers. If a trafficker hurts somebody and it's proven in a court of law, the victim deserves compensation for that from the criminal case. It also set up in the federal government, we have an office to monitor and combat trafficking in persons. It puts out that tip report that Jana previously talked about that talks about the trafficking statistics around the world, and it monitors which countries do what to protect victims of human trafficking and what the trafficking footprint looks like across the globe. And it also created something called a T-visa. When immigration laws primarily address coming into the country and employment and family-related issues. But there's a couple specific visas that target victims of crime. And one of those is a T-visa, which is specifically for individuals that are brought to this country for the purpose of being exploited as a trafficking victim. So the T-visa gives them an opportunity to stay here for protection, and in exchange that they help law enforcement in some capacities as well, and they work with the federal government. And lastly, and again, this has evolved over time, so there's been a lot of changes, but this is kind of the bare bones. It's been an ongoing evolution of, as the traffickers do something, our legislature responds. For example, as Ross mentioned, our Florida legislature, under his leadership, had put forth the RICO statute, the racketeering statute, giving prosecutors a better, easier way to prove criminal activity and criminal enterprises. Well, our federal government did a very similar thing under this act. So if you ever were to Google it and look into it, you'll see a plethora of great legislation, but ultimately it's all in the interest of protecting those that have been victims.
Thank you.
Mel, if I can just throw in a little fun
absolutely.
fact, is Florida had the first case, the United States versus TECOM, and it was discovered in down in southwest Florida of a young Guatemalan girl. And she was the first one to receive the trafficking visa under the new TVPA. So Florida has been a first state, and that's why we need to continue to be leaders in the fight against modern-day slavery.
So part of the heart of this, right, to just drive at the realities, now turning the focus to our survivor warriors, these ladies, who will be sharing with us why it is important that our communities get involved in preventing this and assisting men and women to get out. I'm going to start with Tina. Tina, since our viewers this evening have no idea or may not have any idea about what trafficking is about and that they are everyday people, can you give us any insight as to where we may actually spot a victim of trafficking?
Yes, I wanted to just address that. I think a lot of people, I've heard a lot of people say, well, it's in other countries. We probably can't recognize a victim because they're in hotels, deep, dark, and we're not in that kind of area, so we don't understand and we won't see them and be able to help. But that's not the truth. That is happening, and that is the truth, actually, but there's more than that. So what I wanted to have you guys recognize is that if you go to school, if you're in churches, hospitals, foster care, law enforcement, hotels, restaurants, coffee shops, and even the mall, you most likely have ran into a victim of trafficking. And the problem is that you haven't been educated, so you don't know what to see or how to recognize that victim. And so I'm a survivor. I was in school. I was in the public schools. I've been in restaurants and businesses and hotels and hospitals and all those things, and nobody ever contacted me. Nobody ever asked me if I was okay. Nobody paid attention to what was happening in my life. And so I was stuck in that life for many more years. If someone could have just stepped up and said, "You look like you're in trouble." And I did, but people were uneducated. They did not know what to do. And so my heart tonight is, and that I hope that you'll understand, is that we need to educate our people. We need to educate our staff. We need to educate customers. We need to educate organizations and businesses so that they know what to recognize when they're encountering a victim of trafficking. Because we have a coffee shop, and we actually have had a victim of trafficking come into our coffee shop, but we were able to recognize the situation and be able to get her help. If all organizations and businesses were trained to recognize this, how many more could we help and be able to rescue? It's not just in other countries. It's right here in Central Florida, as you've heard by these amazing people here. As a community, we need to want ourselves, you guys that are sitting out there, you need to find where you can. We've got some amazing trainers up here. We all are doing education from different perspectives, but you need to seek out an organization that's teaching you what to look for so that you can be educated and know how to spot a victim. Refuse to be silent. Don't just sit there. People were silent in my life. Please don't be silent. Don't just look the other way. If you see something, like we say something. Don't just see something and think, wow, that kind of looks suspicious, but you know what, I don't want to get involved, and just walk away, because there's a child's life at risk that when you walk away, you're allowing that child to continue to be victimized, raped, and tortured on a daily basis. I'm one of the few, as you've heard, that made it out of that life. And let's don't wait. Let's don't let it be too late. I thought it was too late for me. I honestly never thought I would be sitting here on a panel. I thought I would be dead. But someone intervened in my life, and I'm here today. I hope you guys will intervene in other people's lives, that you don't leave this town hall out there on the internet, that you don't leave hearing this panel and having them share your hearts about how horrible this is that's going on in our very own country, in our own backyard, in our state. You guys will leave here, stand up, and make a difference.
Thank you, Tina. You talked about coffee shop, which you are the owner of the Palette Coffee Brewery in Sanford. I understand it is staffed with volunteers and that the profits are used to support safe houses in Guyana, as well as providing hygiene bags here within Orlando. Of all the products, why coffee?
Well, it's good, for one. I mean, most people love coffee, and I love coffee. But it's also community. So when we decided to open our coffee shop, we wanted to be a part of the community. For me, it was important. We were trying to raise awareness about human trafficking, and we just thought about community and coffee. And whenever I would want to meet with a friend, I would say, let's go to a coffee shop and let's talk. You know, most people do that. And so we opened this coffee shop, like Melody said, that we are volunteer run so that our profits can go to fighting human trafficking. It gets poured into Love Missions, our 501c3. Coffee started in the early 1600s, which is hard to believe. And when it started, it was actually for community. So community, it's always been a part of community from the beginning of time, pretty much. But our coffee shop is different, because through our coffee shop, we're able to raise funds to help support all the anti-trafficking projects that we're doing. And we're also created a place for people to feel safe. And so that, like I told you, we actually had a survivor come through our coffee shop, and through our training, we've had victims be able to self-identify. We have about 4,000 people that come through our coffee shop a month. That's a lot of people. Our baristas and our volunteers tell them about human trafficking. They tell them about what Love Missions is doing. So they're bringing awareness every single day. This is a business that is able to bring awareness every single day, and that right there is amazing. It's a tool for us to be able to speak, and that gives us 4,000, well, really, I guess 8,000, because you have two eyes, but 8,000 eyes out there on the streets that now, once they've heard about what we're doing, are looking. They're looking around them, around their area, around their community. They're watching, and they're wanting to make a difference. So it isn't just about coffee. It's about using coffee as a tool every single day to bring awareness about human trafficking right here, and letting people know this is not just happening in other countries. This is happening right here in Sanford, where our coffee shop is, in Orlando. It's happening all around us and worldwide. We've been able to see the fruits of what we're doing, and for me personally, it makes a difference, because every time I see a life changed, that gives me excitement and value to know that I'm making a difference in the world. I came from right where they're at, and I know what that feels like, and I'm just hoping that I'm able to bring hope to them, to see that they don't have to stay trapped where they are, that they can actually be successful and live a great life. So.
Thank you, Tina, for your courage. I turn this over to Savannah. I have a two-part question for you.
Tina already answered it.
You did? All right. Well, I'm going to expand on past Tina, because we do want to hear your voice. So you grew up here, went to school here, and yet by all accounts you were trafficked right under everyone's noses. First of all, what other groups can you think of that should be trained? And going through that nightmare, what would have been the biggest difference for you in the early years, so we can all learn what to look for from a child's point of view?
I think the simple answer is that everybody needs to be trained. Schools, teachers, anybody who works in the school, hospitals, medical professionals, like the Uber drivers, flight attendants, anybody who comes in contact with people, even just in your neighborhood, should be trained, because everybody sees human trafficking happening, but a lot of people just don't know what it is, and so they don't do anything. I grew up around here, went to schools in Orlando, and I was being trafficked while I was in school. And I would ask my teachers for detention so that I didn't have to go home right after school. And they would let me stay, but they never asked why I didn't want to go home. I was sold out of hotels right here. And the staff at the hotels would assist my trafficker in letting them into hotel rooms, or letting men into hotel rooms so that my trafficker didn't have to stay there with me. So people knew what was happening. Some knew and just chose not to do anything. Others knew something was happening, but helped me by letting me stay at school because it was a safe place. And then other people, I'm sure many people I came in contact with, they just had no clue that anything was happening, or they thought that they weren't sure if anything was happening. So if people were trained and knew what to do, I could have gotten help when I was 11 or 12 instead of when I was 26.